Let's talk about the NHS, the woke NHS, the envy of the world, the organization that keeps receiving more money from the taxpayer, yet at the same time missing it, getting wasted, completely wasted. So now we're going to be talking about the truth about the NHS, about the history of the NHS and the alternatives. So there is this taboo in this country. If you talk about the NHS reforms, they would say, on the one hand, they say, well, you want to take it back to the 1930s where people were dying. And well, okay, that was an outdated system as well. And they say, well, you want an American system where people will be dying on the street and paramedics will ask for payments. No, that's not true. We want a basic universal access and healthcare like the Western European countries, like the Northern European countries, like Singapore, like Australia. And now we have Dr. Christian Niemetz from the IEA who has made this video telling the truth about the NHS. Let's go to the video.
The foundation of the NHS is nothing to celebrate. It makes more sense to think of it as a regrettable historic mistake. This week marks 75 years since the founding of the NHS. This has been marked by countless tributes from political, community and even religious leaders. But founding may not quite be the right word here. It's not that any new healthcare facilities were created around that time. What really happened in the late 1940s was simply the nationalization or government takeover of an existing network of independent healthcare facilities. The nationalization of healthcare brought some initial improvements for some people. It's not that there was no healthcare system before the NHS. Of course there was one. There was a cooperative insurance system which covered the majority of the population. But that pre-war insurance system had its gaps. It did not cover everyone, and it only covered a limited range of treatments. The NHS was a more comprehensive system, both in terms of what it covered, but also in terms of whom it covered. So in that regard, the NHS was initially an improvement. However, those improvements could also have been made within the old system. Rather than nationalizing the entire healthcare sector, the government could also have chosen to simply extend the pre-war system. It could have made that system more generous and more inclusive. That was already happening anyway, and that's precisely what happened in a number of neighboring countries. That's what happened in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in West Germany, and in Switzerland. So, in an alternative timeline in which the NHS had never been set up, how would healthcare in Britain have evolved? And what would healthcare in Britain look like today? There's no way the old insurance system would have just stayed the way it was in the 1930s. The most likely alternative is that it would simply have evolved along similar lines as the systems that I've just mentioned. Today, countries like the Netherlands have universal health insurance systems, and healthcare is mostly privately provided. Clinical outcomes in such systems are generally better than here, standards are generally higher, and waiting times are generally shorter. Unlike the system here, those systems are not permanently in crisis. So in all likelihood, we would have better healthcare today if the NHS had never been set up.
Well, that's a key point. This is the only system that is in permanent crisis, regardless of what government is in place, regardless of how much money you give it. Initially, they created a system where they decided to own and control the doctors and nurses. And then over the few decades and the years that we've seen, the system now also owns the patients. Your body belongs to the state. We've seen so many examples of patients not being allowed to do things, especially kids, because the government, the state owns it. If the parents decide to do something for the kid, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to get the kid away from the hospital or vice versa. It's disgusting. And again, all you needed to do, instead of owning the actual industry, the doctors and nurses are now the patients and the taxpayers, all you had to do was just give more access, universal access to every single person in the country, regardless of their income. That's what you do in a normal civilized country. That you've seen all the other examples of universal healthcare system. The NHS has now become the sacred cow. You cannot even criticize it. You can't even discuss NHS reforms. And the Tory government also made a massive mess in the beginning of 2010 onwards, That doesn't really help. They just keep throwing money at it, and it keeps getting bloated and it's getting wasted, and they're just going around dancing on TikTok and with the rainbow flags and unicorns. Anyway, let me know what you think of this. We're going to come back later as well to talk about the NHS. We're going to talk about the excess deaths again on this channel and another mistake done by the system. I'm Mahyar Tousi, and we are the media.